He once said, "I wanted a woman, not a mother." 4 years later, he saw her again, with 3 little girls who had his eyes. Adrian Carter had always believed that life could be built out of order, logic, and control. He knew how to negotiate billion-dollar contracts, predict markets, and bend entire industries toward his advantage. He understood power and how to hold it. Yet when Lily Hart had told him she was pregnant, something inside him snapped, not because he didn't care, but because he cared too much and had no idea how to handle the vulnerability that came with it. Fear had taken the shape of arrogance, and pride became a shield. In a moment of panic, he had typed the words that would define the next 4 years of both their lives. "I wanted a woman, not a mother." He convinced himself it was the right decision, that she would be better off without him, that he had prevented both of them from a future filled with stress, resentment, and limitation. He threw himself back into work, building his company into something even larger, more powerful, more demanding. He filled his life with meetings, events, shallow relationships, and noise. If the thought of Lily crept into his mind at night, he dismissed it. If he wondered what happened to the child, he buried it. If he felt a dull ache in his chest when he remembered her laugh or the way she used to touch his hand when she spoke, he trained himself to forget. Lily, meanwhile, felt like the world had collapsed beneath her feet. She had loved Adrian with a softness that terrified her, and when he walked away, she had to learn how to breathe again. The pregnancy was harder than she expected. There were complications, physical strain, and the overwhelming reality that she was alone. When the doctors told her she was having triplets, she laughed through tears, unable to tell whether the emotion was joy or panic. She worked as much as her body allowed, saved every dollar, leaned on distant acquaintances for small favors, and forced herself to stay standing even when exhaustion blurred her vision. When the girls were born, their tiny cries filled the hospital room like a storm breaking after days of heavy sky. They had dark wavy hair and blue eyes so bright and familiar that her breath caught in her throat. They looked exactly like him. For a moment, she almost hoped he would appear in the doorway, say he was sorry, say he would try, say anything at all. But the doorway remained empty, and she reached for her daughters with a heart both broken and fiercely alive. The first year was survival. She slept in short fragments between feedings. She learned to hold all 3 at once, to rock them in a rhythm that became instinct, to silence her own tears so she wouldn't wake them. There were days she felt like she was disappearing inside motherhood, like she was dissolving into milk and blankets and lullabies, but there were also moments of breathtaking tenderness. The way they each curled their tiny fingers around hers. The quiet weight of them sleeping on her chest. The sudden laughter that filled the small apartment like sunlight. She discovered strength in herself that she hadn't known existed, a strength that didn't roar but endured. By the time 4 years passed, Lily had built a life in a small coastal town, far from skyscrapers and polished offices. She worked part-time at a little cafe, and the owner allowed her to bring the girls when childcare fell through. The townspeople knew her name. They smiled when they saw her, helped without asking when she struggled with 3 sets of mittens, shoes, and hair ribbons. She was still tired, but the exhaustion no longer felt like drowning, it felt like living. The girls grew into bright, curious children who laughed loudly and ran everywhere. They adored the ocean, the sand, the seagulls, and the world felt full of new beginnings. Adrian never knew any of this. He continued in his high-rise life, though something in him began to dull. The relationships he pursued felt hollow. Achievements didn't satisfy him the way they once had. He couldn't explain the sense of something missing, a faint echo of something important he had thrown away. He never said Lily's name, but sometimes, when he walked home late at night, he would think of a softness he once held and lost, and the ache would return, sharper than before. He didn't yet know that his carefully constructed life was already one step away from shattering. He didn't know that fate was waiting for him on a park path, in the sound of children's laughter, in the familiar blue of 3 small pairs of eyes. He didn't know that everything he had run from was about to find him again. The day Adrian saw them began like any other, ordinary in a way that gave no warning of how everything in his life was about to tilt. He had traveled to the coastal town for a business acquisition, expecting to spend a single efficient day reviewing documents, signing contracts, and returning to the city before nightfall. His assistant booked him into a quiet hotel near the shore, and when the meetings ended earlier than scheduled, he found himself with an unfamiliar stretch of free time. The sky was clear, the air soft with the gentle scent of salt and flowers carried from the dunes, and for the first time in months, he walked without purpose. He followed a winding path that led into a park overlooking the beach, thinking only of clearing his head before returning to his world of polished boardrooms and silent elevators. He was not thinking about Lily, not consciously, though she lived in the quiet places of his memory like a song he could not fully forget. So when he heard laughter, high and bright like something breaking open in the air, he did not expect the sound to turn his body still. 3 little girls were running through the grass, chasing one another in uneven circles. Their curls bounced with every step, wild and soft, the color of deep chestnut touched by sunlight. When one turned toward him, her eyes shone a shade of blue he knew too well. He felt the moment like a physical blow, his breath stopped, his heart stuttering in his chest as recognition slammed into him. He watched them for several seconds, unable to move, unable to think, unable to breathe. Then he saw her. Lily sat on a blanket nearby, her hair catching the sunlight, strands of gold glowing like something celestial. She was smiling, a quiet, soft smile that came from somewhere deep inside her, a smile that belonged to someone who had learned how to survive something painful and still find beauty anyway. The sight of her hit him harder than he was prepared for. She looked different, not the fragile girl he remembered but a woman who had been remade by life. She appeared tired, yes, but strong, grounded, and whole in a way he had never allowed her to be when she was with him. He could not look away. One of the girls stumbled, and Lily rose to her feet, moving toward her with calm, steady steps. She knelt, checked the child's knee, kissed it gently, and the little girl's tears turned into small hiccups of laughter. It was such a simple moment, but to Adrian it was devastating. It was love in its purest form. Love he had rejected. Love he had believed he didn't need. Love that had continued living, growing, thriving without him. He felt the weight of his past words crash into him like cold water, heavy and merciless. I wanted a woman, not a mother. He remembered the message exactly, the sting in her silence afterward, the way she had stopped responding. He had believed he was saving himself. Now he understood he had simply cut out everything that could have made him human. He stepped forward before he realized he was moving. The girls noticed him first. They stared at him with curious, open expressions, the way children look at something new and unfamiliar but not frightening. Then Lily looked up. For a second, time held. Her eyes widened only slightly, just enough for him to see the shock bloom behind them, the sudden storm of old pain, disbelief, memory, and something sharper. She did not gasp. She did not cry. She did not speak his name. She simply straightened, gathering her daughters closer with a movement that was subtle but instinctive, protective in a way that told him everything he needed to know about the years he missed. Adrian felt something in his chest constrict. The words he had prepared once, the apologies he had imagined but never said, vanished from his mind. All he could do was stand there, staring at the life he had thrown away and the family he had never imagined would exist. Lily did not look away, but her gaze was distant, steady, unbreakable. She was not the girl he left. She was a mother now, and her strength radiated from her like quiet fire. He finally spoke her name, and his voice sounded unfamiliar, rough, unsteady. She did not answer. She only held the hand of the nearest child and waited. The silence between them felt like the ocean itself, vast, deep, and filled with everything that had been left unsaid. The moment was not a reunion. It was a reckoning. And Adrian understood, perhaps for the first time in his life, that love was never something he could control, dismiss, or step away from. It was standing right in front of him, three small reflections of his own eyes watching him with innocent curiosity, and Lily, who had learned how to live without him. The world he had built for himself began to crack. And he knew, without question, that nothing would be the same again. The shock of seeing Lily and the girls did not fade when Adrian returned to his hotel. If anything, it settled deeper, growing heavier, like a weight he could not put down. He lay awake for most of the night, staring at the ceiling, replaying the scene over and over again. The laughter of the girls echoed in his memory, and Lily's steady, guarded eyes held him like a mirror he could no longer avoid. He had always been able to outrun regret by drowning in work, noise, movement, but now silence betrayed him. Every part of him felt unsettled, as if something had been ripped open. He had imagined what it might feel like to see Lily again, but nothing prepared him for the reality of the three children who clearly carried his features, his expressions, even the same slight dimple near the corner of their mouths. They were undeniable. They were his. The next morning, Adrian made a choice that surprised even himself. Instead of leaving town, he found himself walking the same path to the park. He wasn't sure if Lily would be there again, but the pull was stronger than reason. He walked slowly, almost afraid of hoping, and when he reached the clearing, he saw them. Lily was sitting on the same blanket, the girls drawing shapes in the sand with small sticks. One looked up first, pointed at him, and the others turned, their faces filled with innocent curiosity rather than recognition. Lily's posture shifted the way it had the day before, subtle, protective, watchful. He approached carefully, as if stepping into a sacred space. Lily did not greet him. Her silence was not anger, but boundary, and he understood that now. He sat at a respectful distance, leaving space between them. The girls continued playing, glancing at him occasionally, whispering to each other in the hushed tones children use when they think they are being secretive. He wanted to speak, to explain, to apologize, but the words that once felt rehearsed now seemed too small for the weight of what he had done. Instead, he watched them, letting the moment unfold on its own. After several minutes, the boldest of the girls stood and walked toward him. She had sand stuck to her palms and knees, and her curls framed her face like a halo touched by the wind. She looked up at him without fear. "Are you lost?" she asked, in the clear, bright voice of a child who has not yet learned caution. The question struck him in a way he did not expect. He felt something tighten in his chest before he answered softly, "Yes. I think I was." Lily's eyes flickered, just barely. The child considered his answer, then nodded, as if it made perfect sense, and went back to her sisters. Adrian tried to smile, but the emotion behind it was too raw. He swallowed and finally spoke to Lily, his voice quiet and steady. "I didn't know," he said. "I thought I could walk away and keep going. I thought leaving would protect everything I had built. I was wrong." Lily did not look at him right away. She traced a line in the sand with her finger, her expression unreadable. When she did speak, her voice was soft but firm, like someone who had learned her strength the hard way. "You didn't just walk away," she said. "You erased us. You erased me." There was no accusation in her tone, it was simply truth. And hearing it spoken aloud was more painful than any anger could have been. "I know," Adrian said. His voice shook slightly, surprising him. "I know there is nothing I can say to undo that." Lily exhaled slowly, her eyes drifting to the ocean. "I didn't need your money," she continued. "I needed someone who wouldn't run when life wasn't perfect. I became a mother overnight, and I did it alone." She paused, and her gaze returned to him, steadier now. "I won't let you come back in just because you regret leaving." He understood. For the first time, he truly understood. Regret alone was not enough. Wanting to be in their lives was not enough. He would have to prove something he had never needed to prove before, his ability to stay, to show up, to be more than apologies and good intentions. "Let me try," he said quietly. "Not for me. For them. And for the person you became while I wasn't watching." Lily didn't answer. She simply stood, gathered the girls, and began to leave the park. They ran ahead of her toward the path. For a moment, she paused beside him, not close enough to touch, but close enough for him to feel the warmth of her presence like a memory rekindling. "If you really mean that," she said, not unkindly, "you'll still be here tomorrow. And the day after. And the day after that." Then she walked away. And for the first time in years, Adrian did not leave. He watched her go, his heart heavy and full, and he knew he would return. Because he finally understood what love required, showing up not once, but every single day. Adrian returned to the park the next day, and the next after that. At first, the routine felt fragile, like a thin thread that might snap if he pulled too hard, but with each passing day it became something steady and grounding. He arrived early, sometimes before Lily, and sat on the same bench overlooking the shore. The children noticed him before she did. They pointed, whispered, sometimes waved hesitantly, sometimes ignored him entirely. He did not push himself into their world, he simply let them see that he was there and not leaving. Lily remained cautious, and her caution was not cold. It was careful, patient, shaped by years of heartbreak stitched back together piece by piece. She didn't try to test him, nor did she try to make the path easy. She simply allowed time to reveal whether his efforts were real or temporary. The silence between them began to change. It was no longer sharp and painful, but thoughtful, layered with shared glances and quiet understanding. Occasionally, Lily would answer when he asked small questions about the girls: which one liked to collect seashells, which one was afraid of dogs, which one hated having her hair brushed. He learned their names slowly, making sure to say them gently, like something precious that didn't belong to him yet. One morning, the boldest of the three girls ran toward him holding a small, misshapen sandcastle in her hands. She held it out to him proudly, her curls tangled by the sea breeze. "Look," she said. "I made this." Adrian took the fragile sculpture with careful fingers, terrified of crushing it. "It's perfect," he said quietly. She beamed, and for a moment her smile looked exactly like his. Lily saw the interaction from a distance, and her expression softened just slightly, though she quickly looked away. The smallest moments were becoming threads connecting them, but none of them said it aloud. As days turned into weeks, Adrian stayed in the town longer than he ever intended. His assistant grew confused, his board frustrated, but he didn't care. For the first time in years, he felt like he was doing something real, something that mattered. He helped where he could, small things at first. Carrying groceries. Fixing the latch on Lily's front gate when it stuck. Bringing coffee to the cafe where she worked when she had too little sleep. He didn't announce his actions. He didn't ask for acknowledgement. He simply showed up, quietly and consistently, the way he should have years ago. One afternoon, one of the girls fell while climbing a rock near the tide line. The fall wasn't serious, but the shock made her cry, and the sound filled the air like something urgent and sharp. Before Lily could reach her, Adrian was already moving. He knelt beside the child, lifting her carefully, holding her close, whispering soothing words he didn't know he remembered how to say. The little girl's sobs softened into hiccups, her face pressed into his shoulder. When Lily reached them, she paused, her hand hovering midair, unsure whether to take her daughter or let the moment continue. Adrian looked up, and their eyes met. There was no triumph in his gaze, no claim, only tenderness and a quiet grief that spoke of all the moments he had missed. Lily let the moment be. Later that evening, Lily invited him to walk them home. It was the first time she had done so. The girls skipped ahead, holding hands and singing to themselves, while Lily and Adrian walked behind them, their steps falling into the same rhythm. The silence between them felt different now, not heavy but thoughtful, like something releasing its hold. When they reached the small cottage, she didn't say goodbye immediately. Instead, she leaned against the railing, watching her daughters chase butterflies in the yard. "You're different now," she said finally, her voice quiet, not accusing, simply observing. Adrian exhaled slowly, his voice low. "I lost something I didn't understand how to keep. I thought love was something that made you weak. I thought building a life big enough would protect me from needing anyone. I was wrong." He didn't look at her while he spoke, as if the admission was something sacred that needed space. "I can't undo what I did. I can only be better now." Lily didn't respond right away. She watched the children, the evening sun turning their curls into gold. Then she looked at him. There was no forgiveness yet, but there was no hatred either. Only memory, truth, and something beginning to soften. "I don't know where this leads," she said. "I don't know what you can be to them. Or to me." He nodded. "Whatever you allow me to be. I'll earn it." Slowly. She considered his answer, then gave a small, nearly invisible nod, the kind of nod that changes the direction of an entire life. The girls ran toward them, laughing, and Lily opened the door, calling them inside. She didn't invite him in, not yet. But before she stepped into the house, she turned back to him. For the first time in 4 years, she smiled at him. Not the girl she once was, but the woman she had become. It was small. It was enough. Something began to shift in the weeks that followed, not suddenly, but slowly, like the way the tide changes direction. You don't notice the exact moment, but one day you realize the water is moving differently. The town grew used to seeing Adrian with Lily and the girls. Sometimes they walked along the pier, the children taking turns holding his hands. Sometimes he sat with them on the sand, helping them build castles that were always washed away but always rebuilt again. The girls no longer stared at him like a stranger. They laughed with him, tugged on his sleeve when they wanted attention, climbed into his lap when they were tired. Lily watched all of this with careful eyes, but she did not pull them away. She allowed the connection to form, even as she guarded her own heart with a quiet, deliberate strength. One evening, the wind was warm and the sky was painted with streaks of orange and pink. Lily was closing the cafe where she now worked full-time. The day had been long, the kind of day where exhaustion settled between her shoulder blades. The girls were drawing with chalk on the sidewalk, their dresses dusted in pale pastel shades. Adrian was there too, not because she asked but because he simply showed up, the same way he had every day. He crouched beside the children, asking them questions about their drawings, and Lily found herself watching the scene with an expression she didn't realize she had, soft, thoughtful, almost gentle. When the cafe was finally closed and the sun had nearly disappeared into the sea, they began walking home. The girls ran ahead, their laughter echoing off the buildings. Adrian and Lily walked behind, side by side, but still with that small, respectful space between them. The silence was no longer tense, it was comfortable, something lived in and familiar. "You changed your whole life," Lily said after a while, her voice quiet but steady. Adrian kept his eyes on the horizon as he answered. "It didn't happen all at once. I just woke up one day and realized the things I had built didn't feel like my life anymore. I had everything I thought I wanted, but none of it meant anything." He paused, searching for words that didn't feel rehearsed. There was no warmth. No meaning. No home. Lily considered his words for a long moment before she responded. "Home isn't something you just find," she said. You build it. And rebuild it. Especially when it breaks. He looked at her then, really looked. She wasn't lecturing him or punishing him. She was telling him what she had lived. She had rebuilt her own heart piece by piece, and there was something deeply powerful in that. As they reached her house, one of the girls came running back, tripping over her own feet. She stumbled hard and began to cry, the kind of sharp cry children make when fear hurts worse than pain. Lily took a step forward, but Adrian reached the child first. He didn't panic or freeze. He knelt, gathered her carefully into his arms, and held her close, murmuring soft, steady words. The little girl clung to him, her small fingers gripping his shirt, her sobs quieting into tiny breaths. Lily watched, and something inside her cracked, not painfully, but like something long frozen beginning to melt. He wasn't playing the part of a father. He was simply being one. When the child finally calmed, Adrian carried her toward the house. The other two girls followed, talking softly to each other as if trying not to disturb the moment. Lily opened the door, and this time she didn't ask him to stop at the threshold. She stepped aside. He entered. The house was small but warm, filled with soft colors, children's drawings taped to the walls, stacks of toys in the corner, and the faint scent of vanilla from the candle on the kitchen counter. Adrian set the little girl down gently. She ran to her sisters, who pulled her into a tangled hug. Lily watched them, then turned to Adrian. Her voice was low, but there was no distance in it anymore. "Stay for dinner," she said. He froze, not from confusion but from the sudden surge of emotion he barely managed to contain. He nodded, his voice rough. "If you want me to." Lily didn't smile, but her eyes softened in a way that made breathing feel easier. "I wouldn't have asked if I didn't," she answered simply. They spent the evening cooking together, moving around each other in a kitchen smaller than any space Adrian had lived in for years. The girls sat at the table, swinging their legs, telling stories that overlapped and tangled so much they barely made sense, but the house felt full, bright, alive. For the first time in a very long time, Adrian didn't feel like a visitor in his own life. He felt present. He felt needed. And most of all, he felt home. The days that followed grew warmer, filled with long evenings and slow mornings. What had once been tension between Adrian and Lily was now something quieter, something unspoken but present, like a thread stretching gently between them. He did not stay every night for dinner, but often enough that the children no longer looked surprised to see him. Sometimes he helped Lily with bedtime, sometimes he only stayed long enough to walk them home. It was not a sudden reunion, not dramatic or rushed. It was something steady, careful, almost tender. Adrian moved slowly, because Lily had lived enough pain to know that words meant nothing without consistency, and he understood now that consistency was the only apology that mattered. One evening, rain fell surprisingly soft for a coastal storm. The streets were wet, the air thick with the scent of the sea. Lily was closing the cafe late because a supply order had been delivered off schedule. Adrian had been waiting with the girls, entertaining them with quiet stories while they sat on the counter coloring paper napkins. When Lily finally locked the door, the rain was coming down harder, and she hesitated, glancing at the distance they needed to walk home. Without speaking, Adrian took off his jacket and draped it around her shoulders. It was an instinctive gesture, done without thought or expectation. Lily froze at the feeling of the familiar weight and warmth, her breath catching softly, but she didn't remove it. The girls laughed as they ran ahead into the rain, and the two of them walked slowly, side by side, the streetlights glowing like amber halos in the mist. The walk would have been quiet, but Lily's voice broke the silence. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you stayed?" she asked, her tone neither nostalgic nor accusing, only honest. Adrian exhaled, the sound long and heavy. "Every day," he answered. "But I can't change who I was then. I was afraid of losing control. Afraid of needing someone. Afraid of being needed. I thought power meant not relying on anyone. He paused, searching the dark wet pavement as if the explanation lay there. But everything I built to keep life under control ended up empty. I had success. I had respect. But it all felt like it belonged to someone who wasn't me anymore. Lily did not respond immediately. She absorbed his words the way she always did, quietly, deeply, without rushing. The rain softened around them, falling like a curtain of silver. I loved you then, she said at last. I loved you so much it felt bigger than anything I knew how to carry. When you left, I had to learn how to live without something I couldn't replace. Her voice didn't tremble, but it wasn't steady either. And now I don't know what I feel. Not yet. Adrian stopped walking. She took another step before realizing he wasn't beside her. She turned. His expression was open, unguarded, raw in a way she had never seen before, not even in the hardest moments of their past. You don't owe me forgiveness, he said. And I don't expect the past to disappear. I just want the chance to be here now. To be someone you don't have to carry alone. To be someone they can count on. And if that's all I'm allowed to be, I'll take it. I'll stay anyway. There was no plea in his voice. No pressure. Just sincerity, quiet and full. The rain kept falling between them, and Lily felt something in her chest loosen. Not surrender. Not conclusion. Only possibility. They resumed walking, and neither spoke again until they reached the house. The girls were already inside, peeling off wet clothes and giggling. Lily held the door open for him, silently inviting him in. He stepped over the threshold with the kind of reverence reserved for places that are not merely houses but hearts. Later that night, after the children were asleep, Lily sat at the small kitchen table with a mug of tea warming her hands. Adrian was about to leave when she said his name softly, stopping him. You stayed, she said simply. Through rain. Through everything uncomfortable. You stayed. He nodded. I will keep staying. There was no dramatic moment, no sweeping confession. Just that. A promise spoken quietly, and believed. Lily didn't ask him to sit, but she didn't ask him to leave either. They stood in the soft light of the kitchen, the kind of room that held the sounds of childhood and warmth, and something almost like peace settled between them. It was not love again. Not yet. But it was the beginning of something that could become love, now that both of them finally understood what love required. Summer arrived quietly, the days stretching long and golden along the coast. The town grew busier with visitors, but for Lily, Adrian, and the girls, life settled into a rhythm so natural it was almost fragile to touch. Breakfasts turned into shared routines. Adrian would stop by in the mornings, sometimes bringing fruit from the market or flowers the girls insisted on choosing. He never tried to overstep, but the girls began waiting for him by the window when they woke up. Their trust came not from grand gestures, but from presence, repetition, and the reassurance that he continued to show up day after day. Lily found herself watching him more often. Not with the dazed love she once carried, but with a curious, cautious wondering. She saw the way Adrian knelt when the girls spoke to him, how he listened without interrupting, how he learned each of their small personalities. The eldest was thoughtful, always observing before acting. He gave her space to think. The middle child was bold and loud. He let her climb on his shoulders and cheered her bravery. The youngest was shy and sensitive. He held her when she grew overwhelmed and never rushed her into the world. These were pieces of love he hadn't known how to express years ago. Now he learned them slowly, intentionally, as if every moment were a second chance he refused to waste. But healing does not happen in a straight line. One afternoon, Lily received a letter from the hospital. One of the girls had shown signs of a congenital heart condition during a routine checkup. It wasn't life-threatening, the doctor said, but it would require monitoring and possibly surgery in the future. The words were clinical on paper, but when Lily read them, her hands shook. The memory of sitting alone in a hospital room giving birth to 3 premature babies came rushing back, overwhelming and suffocating. She didn't want to tell Adrian. Not because she didn't trust him, but because old wounds whispered that she was alone in this, that she had always been alone in this. She sat at the kitchen table long after the girls had fallen asleep, the unopened envelope beside her, feeling that old ache return. When Adrian knocked gently at the door, she didn't move at first. He stepped inside when she didn't answer, sensing the shift in the air. It didn't take him long to notice the letter. He didn't touch it. He simply sat down beside her, waiting. Lily's voice came slow and quiet, like someone learning to speak underwater. She explained the doctor's words, her fears, the memories she had never allowed herself to say aloud. As she spoke, her breath trembled, and for the first time in years, she cried not from exhaustion but from the weight of remembering how deeply she had once suffered alone. Adrian didn't speak. He didn't offer solutions. He didn't say it would be okay as if certainty were his to give. He just reached out, slowly, carefully, giving her time to pull away if she needed. She didn't. When his hand closed over hers, she let it stay. "I should have been there," he whispered, and his voice fractured. "I can't fix the past. But I'm here now. Whatever happens, doctor visits, surgeries, nights when you're scared and tired, I will be here. You don't have to do any of it alone ever again." Lily closed her eyes. The room was still except for the sound of her breathing in his. Trust wasn't something spoken into existence. It returned in pieces, in quiet nights, in shared fear, in hands held through something heavy. In the days that followed, Adrian accompanied them to the hospital for further tests. He held the smallest girl's hand when she lay on the examination table, whispering stories about waves and stars and impossible constellations. The child didn't cry. Lily watched him, her heart tightening with an ache that was no longer pain but something gentler, something opening. That evening, after the girls were asleep, she stood on the porch looking at the ocean. Adrian stepped outside a moment later, but he didn't approach her. He simply stood beside her, the way someone stands beside another person when they are learning how to breathe again. Lily spoke first. "I was afraid of letting you close. I thought if I did, I would lose everything I rebuilt." He turned his head to her, not pushing her to continue. "But I see now," she said, her voice soft but sure, "that maybe what I rebuilt was never meant to stay closed. It was meant to grow." This time, she reached for his hand. It was the first choice she had made toward him since the day he left. Not a return to the past, but the beginning of something new. The end of summer came with a softness that neither of them expected. The days grew cooler, the light changed, and the ocean breeze carried the scent of early autumn. Their lives had settled into something steady, not perfect, but real. Lily woke each morning without dread. Adrian no longer approached the house with hesitation. The girls no longer looked at him with the careful curiosity of strangers. They called him Dad in small, accidental moments at first, moments that made him freeze as if the world itself had paused to acknowledge it. The first time it slipped out, Lily watched his expression change slowly, like sunlight reaching something long covered in shadow. His throat tightened, his eyes lowered, and he simply nodded so the girls wouldn't see his tears. Yet even as peace began to take root, they knew that some things required conversations no one wanted to face. One evening, after the girls had fallen asleep, Lily and Adrian sat on the back steps overlooking the ocean. The sky was turning lavender, the kind of color that seemed to belong only to places where healing had been quietly happening for a long time. Lily wrapped a blanket around her shoulders, but the air wasn't cold. She just felt small in the moment, and vulnerability often made the world feel larger. Adrian broke the silence first, though his voice was soft enough to almost be mistaken for a sigh. He spoke not with confidence but with honesty, explaining how his arrogance had been built not on strength but fear, how the version of love he had once wanted was shallow and brittle because he had been shallow and brittle himself. He admitted that when Lily became pregnant, he hadn't known how to exist in a life that required tenderness. He had panicked. He had chosen pride. And then he had spent 4 years trying to drown the consequences of his own choices in work, money, and noise that could not silence his regret. Lily listened without interrupting. She had waited years to hear not excuses, but truth. When he finished, she didn't forgive him outright. She didn't offer absolution as if love were something that could be switched back on like light in a dark room. She spoke slowly, explaining how she had learned to build a life alone, how she had grown into someone stronger than the girl he once abandoned. She had learned to love herself in the space he left behind. She would not lose that version of herself just because he had finally learned how to stay. Adrian nodded. He didn't argue. He didn't ask. He simply said that he understood, and that he wanted not to replace the life she built, but to be part of it, if she would let him, if she chose it, not because of the past, but because of who they had both become. Months passed. The girl's condition was monitored carefully, and the fear that once felt enormous softened into something manageable, something faced together instead of alone. Their home filled with small laughter, with shared meals, with mornings that didn't feel like battles. Some days were hard. Some nights brought back old grief. But healing had stopped being a destination and had become the shape of their daily living. One afternoon, during the first cool days of fall, they returned to the same park where they had seen each other again for the first time. The trees were turning golden, the playground slightly quieter than it had been in summer. The girls ran ahead, chasing leaves and sunlight. Lily and Adrian walked slower, side by side, close enough that their hands brushed now and then without urgency. When she stopped, he stopped too. There were no grand declarations, no rehearsed speeches. She simply looked at him the way someone looks when they are finished running from their own heart. "I'm not promising a perfect life," she said, her voice steady. "I'm promising one you have to work for. One where you show up. Every day." Adrian nodded, his eyes soft and steady. "I want that. I want all of it." She reached for his hand, not with hesitation, but with the quiet certainty of someone choosing love not because she needs it, but because she wants it. The girls looked up from the playground, saw their parents' hands clasped, and ran toward them laughing, curls bouncing, eyes bright with the belief that the world was safe. And for the first time, it was. Not because the past had been erased, but because they had survived it, and built something stronger in its place.